Yeah, now as you can see, I am dressed for Antarctica. Unfortunately, I'm not in Antarctica. I'm in Cambridge in the UK, but this is the kind of thing that you would wear if you went to Antarctica. So as you can see, kind of leather and Gore-Tex gloves, nice jacket that's like a duvet full of feathers. And I've got this is a fake fur hat. But we do also have some real fur hats for people going into the coldest temperatures, because they are actually the best thing to keep people warm. So, right, I'm going to take off my gloves now and I'm going to share my slides. So if you bear with me just 1 second, let's just make sure that this works. There we go. Is that working, Sarah?
Yes, that's fine.
Brilliant. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about Antarctica, extreme Antarctica, and why you should never eat yellow snow. Now, I think most of you will know why you should never eat yellow snow, but I will answer that question a bit later. Let me just get my... Okay, so this is our Antarctica Week Festival. We're trying to talk to as many school children and members of the public that we can. I work for British Antarctic Survey, and we're doing this because we're working on a project between the UK and the US on the International Thwaites Glacier Collaboration, which is this glacier in West Antarctica, which is the size of Great Britain and Florida, and it's melting. And we're trying to see how much sea levels will rise if this glacier continues to melt, so that our governments can prepare. So, as Sarah said, I've been to Antarctica 5 times. It's absolutely amazing. I've also been to the Arctic. This picture is actually of me in the Arctic last February when I went down with the BBC. So I work in the communications team, and it's my job to promote all things Antarctica. So let's start with some stuff. What is Antarctica? This talk is aimed at kids age 5+, so I'm going to sort of really start this from the bottom to make sure that everybody understands everything. So Antarctica is a continent. It is bigger than Europe, and it is completely covered in ice. So if you want to know what the difference between the Arctic is and Antarctica, Antarctica is a land covered by ice, and the Arctic is a frozen sea surrounded by land. And you must always remember, penguins in Antarctica, polar bears in the Arctic. The way to remember that is, if there were polar bears in Antarctica, they'd eat all the penguins, right? But there aren't. So good way to remember. Where is Antarctica? So it's at the bottom of the world. And I think when we look at the globe, when we're learning about the world, Antarctica's right at the bottom, so it's often missed. It's huge. It's really a massive, massive continent, and it's over the South Pole. And for those of us in the United Kingdom, it is more than 10,000 miles away from here. And that's a really, really long distance. I'll show you how we travel there and explain how long it takes. Now, I think the next slide, Sarah, is the pole. Is that right? So we're going to ask you a question. And the first question is, how much ice is there in Antarctica? Is it 50%? Is it 70%? Or is it 90%? Now, I'd like you to have a minute just to think about what that is. And while you do that, I'm going to answer a question from Betsy, age 7. She said, when is it nighttime in Antarctica? And is it light? That's a really great question, Betsy. At the moment, Antarctica is 24-hour daylight. The sun never sets during what is the summer in Antarctica. So it's summer there when it's winter here. And during the winter, we also have 24-hour nighttime. And I'll show you some pictures. It's quite incredible. I've never been there during the winter. I've only been there during the summer. But I can tell you, you don't feel like you need very much sleep. Okay, Sarah, have we got some answers in? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, yes, we do. I'm going to give them an extra 10 seconds and then I'll end the polling. So Here we go. Okay, I'm going to share the results, and then Athena, you can maybe give us the answer. So most
Brilliant.
people.
How much ice is in Antarctica? Well, 73% of you got it correct. It is 90%. You're absolutely right. Well done, everybody. Clap, clap. Really brilliant. Huge amount of the world's ice is in Antarctica. Ooh. Let me just go to my next slide. Hang on, it's not. Okay. So why are we in Antarctica? We're there to do science. And this photograph was taken at the South Pole. And this shows lots of different nations working together. And that's the amazing thing about Antarctica. It happens collaboratively. You can't do things on your own. And that's why the project that I talked about, the International Thwaites Glacier Collaboration, we're doing it together with the United States. And by doing things together, we can do much bigger, ambitious things. So what's special about Antarctica? Lots of things. It's the coldest, driest, and windiest continent on Earth. It is technically a desert. If you pick up the snow or the ice in Antarctica and try and make a snowball, you can't because it's so dry. It's like sand. So it's a really rubbish place to have a snowball fight. Yes, it's one of the most beautiful. No one lives there. People only visit. And it is home to some amazing animals. And I'm going to show you some pictures in a moment. And it is the world's last great wilderness. It's probably one of the only places on Earth that humankind hasn't visited parts of. It's huge. Very few people have been there in compared to other parts in the world. And we still don't know very much about it. So here is the question that you answered correctly. 90% of all the ice in the world. There's also another interesting statistic. 70% of the world's fresh water is in Antarctica. Now that ice, as in the picture there, is so heavy, it pushes the land below the sea level. And in winter, the ice freezes, the sea freezes around and makes Antarctica twice the size. Now, I work for the British Antarctic Survey, and we are the UK national operator. We have stations, we have ships, and we have aircraft, and I'm going to show you some pictures in a moment. And as I mentioned, I'm working on this collaboration to look at this glacier in West Antarctica and understand how it is contributing to sea level rise as our world gets warmer. We do science. Here are some pictures of some of the science we do in action. We collect ice cores, the picture at the top. We release weather balloons and watch them go to the size of a double-decker bus as they collect data on how Antarctica is changing. And the really neat thing is we're looking at everything from the geology, the ice, the atmosphere, even up to space weather. We're looking at absolutely every aspect of the continent. Now, it gets very cold in Antarctica. And that's a question that's coming soon. Now, this is a picture in the winter. You can see it's dark, as I said, 24-hour darkness. And you've got to be really careful because it can get cold very quickly and your eyelashes can freeze. And you've got to be really careful that you don't get frostnip, which is when bits of your skin get frozen. Bit like frostbite. You may remember the early explorers who lost fingers and toes. How do you get there? I've already said it's really far away. So this is a sort of a shape of the world distorted. So you can see Antarctica, and I've marked the two main stations that we have on the continent. And then you can see the United Kingdom and North America at the top. That's 10,000 kilometers. Just check that there you go. So these are the routes that the ships take. And these are the routes that aircraft take. Now, the quickest I've ever been to Antarctica is in 54 hours, but it can take a matter of days. And it's so far away that you can't fly there directly, as you might imagine. So we tend to fly through South America and also a very small island called Ascension Island in the Pacific. Now, we have two ships. This is the first, the James Clark Ross, and many of our team who are heading to Antarctica left the UK 2 weeks ago. Because of the coronavirus, we're not flying people to Antarctica. It just isn't safe at the moment. So all of our new staff who are going down to our stations are sailing, and it's going to take 7 weeks for them to arrive. They'll be arriving around Christmas time. Now, I said 2 ships. We're actually going to be going to 1 ship, and you may have heard of the RRS Sir David Attenborough. She's a ship that's been built in the UK, and very exciting news. We just got the keys to her last week. So she's now our ship, and we're starting a year of sea trials, and she will be heading to Antarctica in November next year. Now, one of the questions I had was from Emmaus Primary School in Liverpool, and that was, have you ever met David Attenborough? And the answer is, I have met David Attenborough a few times. I've actually even been to his house, which was very exciting. You cannot believe how exciting it is. He's an incredible man, and he is incredibly professional. And what's very interesting about working with him is that I work with journalists who sometimes can be, they want to get their interviews, and they can be quite noisy. But as soon as David Attenborough arrives, everybody goes quiet. You realize that you are in the presence of somebody who is incredibly talented and great, and everybody thinks of him as their childhood hero. And so we never really quite know what to say to him, because he's just awe-inspiring, but he is a lovely man too. Now, the pictures I've shown you of the ship show it nice and calm or with blue sky, and it's not like that when you sail to Antarctica. I've sailed twice, and I can tell you it's really, really bumpy. You go across the Drake's Passage, and it's some of the roughest seas in the world. So spend quite a lot of time in your bed. On a roller coaster, feels like you're on a roller coaster. The only thing is you can't get off. And then we have planes. This is our Dash 7 aircraft, and we fly from South America and the Falkland Islands down to our main Rothera research station. It's quite comfortable on board, lots of cargo, places to sit, and there's a small place at the back where you can make a cup of tea. And I talked about our main station. So our largest station is Rothera Research Station. And as you can see, the setting for it is absolutely stunning. This is Adelaide Island on the Antarctic Peninsula. So if you look at Antarctica as with the tail at the top, we're on the left side of the tail. That's our kind of area of operation. And this is Rothera from the air, and there's a runway there. We don't have runways at any other station, so this is our main gateway station into Antarctica, and we built that runway many years ago. And you'll see the buildings there. So we've got the yellow one is the control tower, the green building is the main station, the very long building, which is runs parallel to the runway, that's accommodation. We have 2 people sleeping in a room. Now, somebody has asked me about radiators. So yes, we do have heating on the stations, and actually it's very warm inside. So you have to really undress when you come inside, and then you have to really overdress when you go outside. So it takes a bit of getting used to. And then our other station on the continent is called Halley Research Station, and this is built on a floating ice shelf. And the unique thing about this station is it's on skis, so you can move it. And we actually did that a few years ago. We needed to move the station because there was a big crack coming in the wrong direction. So we had to move the station upstream. And we took each of the modules apart and towed them using big tractors. That was quite an amazing engineering feat for us, actually, never been done before. And during the winter time, 24-hour darkness. We don't have people wintering at Halley at the moment, but we have done in the past. And this is what it can be like during the winter. So this is the Aurora Australis. This is the solar flares. Now, this is really exciting and something a lot of people don't know. When you've got these colors in the sky, what that means is there's a storm taking place in space, and then you get these amazing colors. And near Halley, we have an emperor penguin colony, and they need the ice to breed. And a lot of our researchers have been looking at where the emperor penguins are. And recently, we've been able to track them by looking at images from space. So we're using images from satellite to help us do our research much more effectively. And isn't that cute? That's a little chick there. So where do you stay? Well, I've shown you some pictures of the stations. Now I'm going to show you what it's like for the scientists that need to go into the deep field. So on the left there, you can see a twin otter aircraft. So we've got 4 of those. They're little aircrafts and they've got skis, so they can land on the snow and ice further inland. You can see they're quite small, so it's not for large parties to travel, but it is for field parties. And that tent on the right, that's made of the same kind of material that Captain Scott would have used more than 100 years ago. It is tried and tested, and it is the best product for camping in Antarctica. It's a 2-person tent, and that's how you might be living for 2 to 3 months whilst you do your field work in Antarctica. So that's what it looks like from the front, and I think I've got that's your view in the morning. And it's very cozy and warm. So people have asked lots of questions about how do you keep warm? And I just want to show you, like the clothes I'm wearing, we use very much a layering effect. So you always make sure you have lots and lots of thin layers, and you can layer up and layer down. And actually, it's really easy to overheat in Antarctica, especially if you're working. And the thing is, the weather can change really quickly. So you need to make sure you have an extra fleece and an extra layer. And the trick that we always adopt is don't allow yourself to get cold. So if you feel that you're getting cold, you need to have a hot drink, you need to eat something, plentiful amounts of chocolate to be eaten when you're out and about, you need quick energy. You can run, make sure you get yourself up and warm. You just never allow yourself to get cold. So that probably answers a few questions that I've had from people. How do you get around? Well, as I said, this is a twin otter aircraft, and that's my colleague Jamie there in the field. And in the old days, of course, we used to use husky dogs. But the dogs came out in the 1980s because Antarctica is designated as a continent for peace and science. So non-indigenous species are not allowed to be there. So the dogs actually came back through the UK and then went to live with families in northern Canada. So this is how we get around now. These are snowmobiles or skidoos, and you drive those and you carry your load behind you. We have lots of vehicles to get around. So this is a snowcat. This is a great way for transporting people to get round and about. And then our tractors get bigger and bigger and stronger in horsepower. So we've got these kind of tractors, and then you have all kinds of diggers. Now, in our HQ in Cambridge, we have most of the vehicles delivered there, and then our team of mechanics take everything apart and put it together again and make sure that it's super easy for people to maintain when you're in Antarctica. Because as you know, if one of these machines breaks in Antarctica, we can't just call the recovery, we have to fix it ourselves. So we have to make sure that absolutely everything's been thought about before our equipment is sent to Antarctica. Now, that you could be mistaken for thinking that looks a bit like a cake. Well, that just shows you what the weather can do in Antarctica very, very quickly. And actually, you've got to be really careful where you park your vehicles, where you put any of your equipment, because if you have a storm, you can very easily lose things. Now, red flags, that suggests danger. That is what you might be seeing through the ice. So this is a crevasse. And this is a sort of big hole that you get through the ice that you can't always see from the top. So when any of our scientists are going into the deep field, we take polar guides, and they are very experienced in looking for crevasses because you don't want people falling through them. And you can see in this picture, we wear things like crampons, and we are roped up, and we wear harnesses. So anybody who's going to be working in the deep field has training in exactly how to cope with these conditions, and also how you would get yourself out of a crevasse if you were to fall down. They're very, very beautiful. I have to say, I've been very lucky to go down a crevasse. They are quite astonishing, really, really incredible experience. I think somebody said to me, what's the most weird thing that's happened to you in Antarctica? It's quite weird going in a crevasse because the sound is quite astonishing. There's no sound at all. It's very eerie and peculiar. Yeah, so it's weird. That's probably the weirdest thing I've done in Antarctica. So what else lives there? Now we get onto the animal section. So loads of penguins. Now I've had some questions from people asking, what is my favorite animal? I've had a few questions about that. And it's going to have to be penguins. They are so amazing. They waddle. They've got the most unique characters. They sometimes come up to you. They can be, especially the chicks, can be quite curious. I just think nothing beats a penguin. And these are the fluffy chicks that you get. They're born to be quite chubby, and then they lose their feathers and they become as beautiful as their parents. So we have lots of different kinds of penguins in Antarctica, and I hope you've been learning about them in your school projects. This is a chin strap because of the strap underneath the beak. These are macaronis. And then we talk about birds. So obviously we know penguins can't fly. Well, Antarctica has the largest bird on the planet. So this is the wandering albatross. And the wandering albatross, unfortunately, they are under decline at our Bird Island Research Station because of fishing, because it's harder for them to get their food. And we're doing a lot of research to try and make sure we can try and protect this species for conservation. But they're incredible. Their wingspan can be up to 3 meters. So if you think how big a meter is, I mean, it's a big size, 3 times that. They're quite extraordinary birds. And the thing that we found by putting little loggers on their feet is sometimes to go looking for food, they actually fly the whole way around Antarctica as they look for food, only stopping a few times. Quite astonishing birds, really, really powerful. And then we have lots of seals in Antarctica. These ones are generally quite noisy and smelly. These are elephant seals, but full of character. And you may have seen programs where the females live in what's called a harem, and they have a bull that protects them. And sometimes you see the bulls fighting for the harem. That's a bull looking like he's having a yawn. They are generally quite noisy and snorty and snotty. They're very amusing to watch. And then these are fur seals. We have these on our around South Georgia. I mean, back about a century ago, they were hunted for their pelts, and the population of fur seals was absolutely decimated. There were just a few hundred left. But since that hunting was banned, their population is now about 6 million, and so there are loads and loads of them. So their population is recovering, which is really good news for the ecosystem. Now they look really cute, and that you want to stroke them. I can tell you they're not. You have to be really, really careful working around these guys because they can bite. They've got a really ferocious bite. And so what we do when we're operating around them is we have a long stick and we tickle their whiskers. And they don't like that. So that's a really good way to just tell them to back off. But they're territorial. So if you go into their territory, they're not very happy. So, and then this is a leopard seal. So this is the largest of the seals, and this one will eat penguins. And then we have lots and lots of whales in Antarctica. And recently, some of my colleagues working at British Antarctic Survey have published some research to say that the whales are, blue whales and humpback whales are returning to South Georgia. So like the fur seals, they were hunted to near extinction by the whalers. And since hunting was banned in the 60s, the whale populations are slowly starting to recover. So that's really good news for the ecosystem and really good news for 2020, which, as we know, has been quite an extraordinary year. And then there are these guys. These are the killer whales, or orca. And when they come out like that, that's called spy hopping. So they're looking to see whether there might be a tasty seal just on the edge of the ice that they can grab for a snack. This is our Bird Island Research Station. So I haven't been here, but I'm told you can smell it before you arrive there. And this is where we do our research on albatrosses, penguins, and seals. And that's what it's like during the winter. So you can see a real distinction between the seasons. And then we have divers. So we've got a few people asking about what, how can you start working for British Antarctic Survey if you're interested in marine life and you get your diving qualification. We employ divers and they dive every day and they use chainsaws to cut a hole in the ice. And I'm going to show you what they see. So there are some quite incredible animals at the bottom of the ocean. And if you can see at the bottom of my slide there's a sea spider. These sea spiders grow to the size of a dinner plate. And we have gigantism in Antarctica because the water's so cold and oxygen rich. We have animals that grow to really big sizes. So you probably wouldn't see a sea spider as big as this in temperate waters, but we do see them. And we've had one in our aquarium in Cambridge for a really long time, and we can't date it because they shed their exoskeleton every year. So it's impossible to date them, but they can live for a really, really long time. And then we've got amazing sponges and sea stars as well. So, as I said before, you need to keep warm when you're in Antarctica. And I have had quite a few questions about how to keep warm. So Alfie asked, how do you keep warm when you were outside? And then Heidi asked, do you hunt for food and when is it delivered? So we don't hunt for food. All our food is delivered on our ships. And it's delivered once a year. So the planners have to really think ahead about how they decide how much food we need. So, as I said, you need to wear lots of layers, and that's our kitting up room in Cambridge, and all of those things you might need. Now, you might see at the end, you need sunglasses and sun cream. So you need sunglasses because the glare off the ice can really affect your eyes, and actually you could get snow blindness. You do have to wear sunglasses. It's so bright, you really do need them. And the other thing that you need is sun cream. And somebody might say, well, it's cold, why do you need sun cream? You absolutely need sun cream because you may have heard of something called the ozone hole, which is over Antarctica, and the ozone layer protects us from the sun's harmful UV radiation. And there's a hole there that was created by our use of aerosols, spray cans back in the day. And there's still a bit of a hole there. It is repairing because those aerosols were banned. You can't use those anymore, but there is still a bit of a hole. So if you're out and about, you can easily get burnt, and you have to put sun cream everywhere. I've been burnt on the inside of my nose, in my ear, and then one day it was hot, I didn't want to wear a hat, and I burnt my scalp, which was very uncomfortable, I can assure you. So you really, really have to be very careful and put sun cream on all the time when you're in Antarctica. And that's what you can end up looking like. It looks a bit ridiculous, really, but that's how you stay warm, with absolutely every single thing that you can put on. Now, we're going to ask you another question. So Sarah is going to share the poll, which is, we're going to talk about the temperature. What is the coldest temperature ever recorded in Antarctica? Is it minus 22.4 degrees C? Is it minus 50 degrees C? Or is it minus 89.2 degrees C? So we're just going to give you a moment to answer that. And I'm going to look through the questions that were sent to just make sure. What do I miss the most when I go to Antarctica? My family and trees, because there's no green. Everything's white and blue. What's the most interesting? Somebody said, have I worked with Mike Bryan before? Yes, I know Mike very well. And he is just about to go on a ship to Rothera Research Station, where he is the station leader. What do you do about your health? How do you maintain your health? Well, that's a really interesting question. Everyone has to have a medical before they go to Antarctica. But in terms of diet and exercise, we have a gym on the stations. We're often very active, and the food is quite incredible. Our chefs, which we employ in our stations, create the most incredible meals, and we use lots of frozen and tinned produce to make sure that everybody's getting enough vitamins and minerals in their meals. What else? Oh, how has equipment improved over time for modern researchers? Have you ever had to use old equipment methods? Well, as I said when I showed a picture of the tent, we do use the best of the old and the best of the new, and what we tend to use today is a blend of both. So it's not a case of just using the newest things, because the newest things don't work, and actually plastic is really problematic in Antarctica. It can snap and get brittle, so we tend to prefer using wood and metal. So, you know, we have for heating, we have quite traditional stoves that if they break, you can fix them, whereas the more modern equivalents are too complicated. You wouldn't be able to fix them as easily, so we use a mix of that. Right, are we ready to share the results, Sarah? So, yes, you got it right. 82% of you knew that the coldest temperature in Antarctica was minus 89.2. Very well done. So there you go. The coldest temperature ever recorded on the planet was in Antarctica at the Russian station of Vostok, 89.2. Now, I've shown you lots of pictures of what it's like when the weather's good, but I can assure you the weather isn't always good. And there's a picture here just to show how hard it can be to do anything when the wind, you know, when you've got 50-mile-an-hour winds and you're in a small tent like this. Now, maybe I should answer the question about yellow snow. So when you are in a field camp, and you're in the middle of nowhere, there is a rule. You have to melt all your ice to make your food and your drinks, and in one direction you will use that ice to do that, and then in the other area you might have an area where you're able to go to the toilet, and that's why you would never melt yellow snow. But I would like to add that most of our field camps now, we take all of our impact on the environment away with us. So we do tend to use portaloos, and we take all our waste back with us to be recycled properly. So that answers quite a lot of questions. How do you go to the loo in Antarctica? The answer is quickly, but also now we have, we put up a tent, which will be the toilet tent. And as you can see there, if the weather is really bad and there's a whiteout, it's really dangerous to go out. And if we're around station, we have lines around the station, so you can hold on to a line to ensure that you can walk safely from one building to another building. But otherwise, if you're in a tent in the middle of Antarctica, you're going to stay in your tent. You're not going anywhere. And it might be that you're there for 4 days. You just stay there. And the weather can cause havoc sometimes. So this picture was taken a really, really long time ago, but that's one of our twin otter planes. And it was parked up and it was lashed down with ropes, but a katabatic wind, which is a very sharp gust of wind, flipped it over on its back. So we have to be really careful where we park things, where we leave things, because everything is about the weather in Antarctica. Now, as I come to the end of my talk, we have got some fantastic resources for teachers and kids and everyone to use. So please take a look at your leisure. So at British Antarctic Survey, we've got lots of information and facts and videos on our website. Then on the International Thwaites Glacier Collaboration, where you registered for this talk, we are going to put all the talks from this week. So please do encourage your friends and family to watch. And we've got all sorts of facts about the science that we're doing. Now, if you're a teacher specifically, or you want to do games in the classroom, like how to dress the polar scientist, we've got some fantastic resources on discoveringantarctica.org.uk and discoverthearctic.org.uk. So that concludes my talk. I hope you've got lots of questions for me. We've got 20 minutes. And I'll have a look through the rest of my questions here to make sure we can do some shout outs. So if I stop sharing my screen. And then we're back. And now I might just take my hat off because I'm a bit hot. Can't hear you, Sarah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, I was just going to say it was really good. Thank you very much. So
Thank you. I'll just look, if you look through the questions, I'll just have a look at my questions as well.
So, I mean, we can do a few shout outs separately to questions, then we can go into questions. Depends what you want to do. We've got lots and lots of schools that I think have joined us today, which is fantastic. For example, we've got Rossall School, Vale Academy in Dunstable, the Porth Community School in South Wales. I think you already answered a question actually from the Emmaus School of Children of Emmaus in Liverpool, which I think was about Sir David Attenborough, and I think that was really interesting actually. Let me try and see. I
had questions from Lexi and Ashton. Just give them a shout out. I've answered those questions about what we wear.
And then we have
my favorite question is, do you have a king? And are there any rules in Antarctica? That is my favorite question. That's TJ. There's no king, but we do have rules that govern, and they're from the British Antarctic Territory. So, for instance, the station leader on our stations, they are a magistrate. They can marry people. They can essentially arrest people, and they have all sorts of kind of rules that make sure that they can govern the people on those stations.
Okay, so Athena, I'm going to come to some other questions actually.
Okay.
That we can go through, maybe ones that haven't come up. So
they're coming in really fast. Shall I open the questions as well?
I've got the Q&A session up, but there's also people coming in. If you have got a question, please try and put it in the Q&A rather than the chat, so I can actually keep track of it. It would be better, please. So someone's actually just, how long do you spend there? Because I know lots of people go for different periods of time, but
it can be variable. So people can go for just a few weeks, but we also have people who overwinter for 18 months. So it's a mix and everything in between. I mean, people, you know, like myself, who've been working in Antarctica for such a long time, wouldn't want to go for 18 months now, but we do have people that that go and overwinter there.
Actually, this is probably quite topical given the time of year, and I know you mentioned people are going down there, but will there be people there at Christmas, and will they get Christmas dinner and presents?
Yes, they will. People will be celebrating on our station, and I've just seen people on the James Clark Ross have just put up their Christmas tree at the weekend. Yeah, the chefs. Food is really important when you're in Antarctica. It's a really good way to anchor the day, especially when you've got 24-hour daylight, because it's a little bit strange. And so food is really important. And Christmas Day is a work day, but the chefs will be making Christmas cake and mince pies, and they will be celebrating for sure.
They had a question come in, I think probably when you showed that picture of the divers, saying, how do the divers not freeze? Because you spoke about yourself putting on lots of clothes and keeping warm, but how do the divers not freeze?
Well, they've got these amazing wetsuits or dry suits. They've got these incredible suits, and they can only go down for quite a short period of time. And they just watch themselves. You have to be extremely experienced to be able to dive. It's not for everybody. You have to have quite advanced levels of training, and yeah, I mean, it's pretty cold, but for anybody diving, I guess it's just the wonder of what you see that kind of keeps you going.
This is a good one. What's the time difference between Antarctica and the UK? That's from Herne Bay Junior School.
Oh, the time difference. Well, I know that our Rotherham research station is 3 hours behind. The other station, I think Bird Island, is 2 hours behind. Yeah, it's fairly similar, but we try to adjust it to kind of where they are in terms of other time zones.
Yeah, okay. Well, Theo, aged 8 in Walden, would like to know, can chocolate save your life from hypothermia?
Absolutely. Do not underestimate the power of chocolate when you're in Antarctica. Really, it's something that you take when you go into the field, and you always have hot drinks. And you also make sure you have a buddy, somebody that's watching you, because if you're cold and you're miserable, you need to tell somebody. They can, you know, actually, I have to admit to you, when I was in the Arctic and it was -25, I got quite cold and miserable. And I said to somebody, I didn't even want to take my glove off to open the where the hot drink was, because, you know, you get to a point where it's sort of harder to make yourself warm. And so somebody else did it for me, and could see that I was getting really cold, and they helped me. And then within about 10 minutes, I was fine again. So you do have to watch out for each other in Antarctica. It's definitely you're definitely a team.
This says, so Lona from Merchants Academy Primary, if you were injured in Antarctica, what would you do?
Well, we have doctors on the stations, we have a doctor on the ship, well, we have aircraft there. So if somebody's broken a bone, for instance, we would do a medical evacuation. Obviously, that can be quite a complicated thing to do, especially in the winter time. But it has been done. You do occasionally have to medically evacuate people. But as I said, we do medicals beforehand. So we try to make sure that everyone that goes down is as fit as possible, and that includes having your teeth seen, because our doctors, even though they're doctors, they have basic dentistry skills. So if somebody has a filling or tooth pain, they might be trying to fix your teeth.
Okay, we've got Lily from age 8 in Malden. What would you need to bring to Antarctica from home? Are there lots of things that people take themselves, or are there, things that...
I think when I've been, it's things that you can't get on station. It's like your favorite things. So newspapers are something that people really like getting, because whilst you can get, there've been a few questions about how do you communicate with family and how do you find out what's going on. We've got internet on our stations, and we've got phone lines. So people talk to their families, and they stay in touch with Facebook and Instagram and things like that. But, oh, I can't remember what the original question was.
Oh, I've lost it. I scrolled down now, actually, sorry. It was about what would you need to bring to Antarctica?
Oh, okay. So yeah, newspapers and, favorite things. And I know when I went down there, I took some sort of perfume sprays, and I remember one of the people who was wintering said, "Oh, that smells so nice," because there's not many smells in Antarctica. It's so dry. So I left all my sort of perfume sprays for a colleague, because it just was something that she hadn't smelt for a while, and she just said it reminded her of home. So
I've got an interesting one here. Someone said, are there swimming pools in Antarctica? And I suppose there aren't swimming pools, because the divers will go into the water, but no
swimming pools in Antarctica. No.
Okay. And there's so many questions. A lot of them have been sort of touched upon in your talk, so it's quite difficult to find. I'm trying to find a few sort of different ones, but it's quite there's so many.
So somebody's asked if there's COVID-19 in Antarctica, and I can safely say that it's the only continent that doesn't have COVID-19. So as I explained in my talk, all of our researchers are traveling down on the James Clark Ross this year. They normally fly, and that's so we can keep COVID out of the continent. And everybody that went on the ship had to go into quarantine for 2 weeks beforehand. So it's been a really challenging year for us, because everything's been done differently to how we normally do, but we really want to make sure we keep the station safe.
I've got an interesting one here, actually. It's not the type medical one, because I know you have medical people there, but I've got Ben who said, says you've got type 1 diabetes. Do you have anyone there? Because insulin doesn't work if it freezes. So I don't know if there are any restrictions, obviously, if you can't go.
I think there are, actually. I know that we have taken people to Antarctica before with diabetes. It can be a bit tricky. I don't think it's to do with the cold. I think there are sort of other issues at play. There are certain medical conditions that make it difficult to work in Antarctica for a longer period. I think you can work for a shorter period, but I think if you wanted to do 18 months, there are certain conditions that unfortunately we just wouldn't feel comfortable having in Antarctica. We need to make sure we keep people safe. So
yeah, that's fine.
Somebody said, do you feel very isolated? I think that's a really interesting question, because when you go to Antarctica, you think you're on your own, but actually you're always surrounded by people. So you're never alone. So I would say that there's an amazing camaraderie, and there's an amazing community, and it's very sociable. And actually, when you leave Antarctica, I desperately miss everybody.
Okay, that's great. Someone has actually said, how worried are you about the rate at which the ice is melting? Which actually ties into what the work that obviously the International Space Collaboration is doing.
So we are concerned about what's happening to Antarctica. There are signs that it is melting, and it's melting at a speed that's faster than anything we've seen in the past. And I mean, that's why we're doing the research that we're doing now. We really need to get the best scientific evidence about what's happening, so that governments can adapt. You know, if the Thwaites Glacier, for example, was to collapse, sea levels would go up by 60 centimeters. You know, that's quite a big, that's a lot. And if you live in a coastal community, that's going to affect your community. So what we should remember is, if a bit of Antarctica melts, you think, well, it's very far away, it's not going to affect me. It absolutely is going to affect you. It's going to affect everybody. And it's going to affect you if you live, you know, if you live in London and you're near the Thames, then if there's a storm surge, you know, the Thames barrier will need to be replaced in the future, because the sea is basically getting bigger. It is getting higher. And as it gets warmer, the sea expands anyway. And so if you're in a, you know, there's some islands in the Pacific that will probably be lost, unfortunately. And that's what we're dealing with as our world gets warmer.
Yeah. So, and how many different countries have stations there in Antarctica?
Oh God, that's a great question. I don't have the answer to hand. Lots. Some of the big nations, so America, Australia, New Zealand, Argentina, Chile, France, Italy, lots. Probably around 50. I can't remember the exact number.
And actually, as part of our work actually with the Thwaites Glacier collaboration, we do have a speaker on Friday who is going to speak to us from McMurdo, which is the US station. So he's going to be doing a talk on tractor traverses, if anybody's interested or wants to put that in their diary or listen.
Yeah, so that's a talk coming from Antarctica, which is fantastic.
So here's another one. What do you do in your free time? So obviously people's down there to work, but you do have a lot of free time as well. What do people do in their free time?
So people go for walks. There's lots of, you know, wildlife to go and spot. You know, you can go and look for whales and penguins and just enjoy the scenery. People go skiing. They go cross-country skiing. What else do they do? We have at most of our stations, we normally have a band. People who go for long periods of time like to learn an instrument, and then we've had bands in the past. What else do they do? We've got, you know, we have like wood workshops and metal workshops, so people make things. Of course, people will do things that we do. You know, they'll download a film and watch a film with their friends and their colleagues, or they'll do some baking. I think people are probably a bit more creative. They seem to be keen to kind of do other things and take advantage of the amazing landscape. I know when I was in Antarctica, there was the option to go skiing behind somebody towing me on a snowmobile. And I have to say, that's one of the most incredible things I've done in Antarctica. And I remember somebody saying, oh no, I don't want to go. I'm thinking, I'm so tired, but I have to go because I'm in Antarctica. So, you know, you really have to just take it and take the opportunity.
Okay, so Neil would like to know, where is it colder, the North Pole or the South Pole? So having been to both places, Athena, the Arctic and the Antarctic.
Well, I've been colder in the North Pole because I went at the end of the winter. So it was -25 and with a wind chill, and it was freezing. It was really, really cold. I've never been that cold in Antarctica, but as you know from our poll, Antarctica is the coldest continent on the planet at minus 89.2. Now, I did see a question that came in and said, what's the warmest temperature that's been recorded? And there was a recording, and I'm trying to remember this, I think it was a couple of years ago, where 18 degrees was recorded at the Argentinian station of Esperanza. Now, that was because of warm winds blowing down from South America. So that was quite unusual. But, you know, in the summer at our stations, you can be, oh, somebody's just said 18.3 last summer. You can actually be wearing a t-shirt and sitting in the sunshine, and it can feel really warm, but it can be deceptive. And suddenly the weather can change and it can be really, really cold. You just have to watch the wind chill. The wind chill can pick up, and suddenly you've put on an extra 2 or 3 layers and it suddenly gets really cold. So you've kind of got to be prepared for anything when it comes to the weather.
Okay, so I've got Lexi age 8 who wants to know how many people there are there at one time. So I guess you can only probably answer from the standpoint of our station, Rotherham, but how many people do you have there at one time?
At our largest station, I think we had 160 last summer season. So over all of our stations, probably about 200. But I know the American station of McMurdo can have about 1,000 people. So it's really variable. So I would say during the summer season, there are several thousand people working all around Antarctica.
Okay. I've got an interesting one here actually, which says, can you get IT jobs there, or is it remotely based? You know, because of course a lot of people talk about science and scientists, but there are other jobs and positions that.
So that's a really great question. We employ lots of different people. So you don't just have to be a scientist. I'm not a scientist. And we have IT people, chefs, carpenters, plumbers, polar guides, administrative people. I think that's the wonderful thing about working in Antarctica is you get to work with lots and lots of different kinds of people. You're not just working with people yourself. We need all sorts of, and you know, we employ people for our ships. For our aircraft, we've got pilots, we've got mechanics. You know, as an organization with 500 staff, we've probably got, you know, almost every kind of person that we need.
That's great. So someone has asked you specifically, Athena, Emma, have you ever been caught in a snowstorm yourself?
I haven't, no, I haven't been caught where I can't see in front of me. I was talking to a colleague of mine though, who did, and he said that suddenly the weather changed and he really could barely see his hand in front of his face. So he actually sheltered next to the snowmobile that he'd been on, and he just waited until the weather got a bit better, you know, for 20 minutes, and then continued with his journey.
And Rowan has asked, are there any trees there in Antarctica?
Are there any trees? No, there's no trees in Antarctica. But that's an interesting question because 1% of the continent is ice-free. And so that is rock, bare rock. And we also have grasses and mosses that grow in areas like the Antarctic Peninsula. And we actually have land animals. And when I say land animals, the largest land animal is tiny. It's the size of an ant, and they're called fruit flies. So we do study the terrestrial biology, and there are some people saying that as Antarctica gets warmer, more of the continent will become ice-free, and we'll have more moss and grass.
I think someone's asked, when are you going to go there again? Are you going there again, Athena?
I have no plans at the moment to go to Antarctica. I hope that in the future I'll get the chance to go again. I think with the coronavirus situation, we're trying to limit the number of people who go to the continent, but there will be, I will be going again for sure. It's an incredible place to go to, but also I'm very keen to promote the work that we're doing and why it's important.
One second, just a few more other little shout outs here. We've got Year 6 pupils at St Luke's Primary in Wigan. Let me see. Gosh, that's interesting here. How many different species of animal have actually been recorded so far in Antarctica? I don't know that whether you'd have an answer for that.
Oh, I don't know actually. I mean, it's what in terms of land animals or
this is
marine life?
This is from Ellie May at St James Junior in Barrow Furness. So how many different species of animal have actually been recorded in Antarctica so far?
Wow, that's a great question. I don't have the answer for that. Have a look at our website, Ellie. Maybe you can see there's a lot of marine life. And what I can tell you is that some of the marine biologists that I work with, when they go to the Southern Ocean and they collect animals from the seabed, they're still finding animals new to science. So they're finding new, new worms, nematode worms. They're finding new species all the time.
Great. Well, I think we're coming to pretty much the end of our hour, actually, Athena. And I think, we've answered
quite a lot of questions. Is there a last question, or is that
so many questions? I can probably find one last question, but there have been so many. I'm really sorry that we haven't been able to answer all of them, but I hope that we've covered as much as we can in Athena's talk today. Maybe this one from Reagan and Merchants Academy Primary. How would you rescue someone trapped in the ice?
How would you rescue somebody trapped in the ice? Well, it really depends where they are. So they're unlikely to be on their own. People do not tend to go off on their own when they are in Antarctica. We have ropes and crampons, and we've got the kind of right equipment. We have polar guides, and Antarctica is a dangerous environment, but we put a lot of effort into making sure that people have training and know the risks. And sometimes things can happen, but you're working with a great team, and somebody in that team will know how to help you. I remember driving a skidoo up a hill, and it was a really bumpy hill, and I fell over and was on my side with the skidoo half on me, and Sarah's laughing. It was not that funny at the time, Sarah, but and I just thought, God, what do I do now? But before I knew it, somebody was there, and somebody was helping me to put the skidoo, check I was okay. So that kind of culture of looking after one another is really important.
Okay. I'm just going to finish with this one, Athena, because I found it and it looks quite a nice one. Do the stars look different in Antarctica?
Well, I wouldn't know. I haven't been there in winter. I don't know the answer to that. I think that's a great question. I think probably, I'm thinking about it, because there's so little light pollution, they probably get the most incredible night skies. And I think that's why they get the most incredible auroral displays. I've never seen that in Antarctica. I have seen it in the Arctic. And it is incredible, but I haven't heard specifically about the stars. We don't actually employ astronomers, interestingly enough. We do look at space weather, but we don't look at astronomy per se.
Great. Okay, thanks, Athena. I think
okay, so we're going to close it now. Thank you to all the questions that came in. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do go to some of the other talks.